Today's story is a bit surreal. After I found out about my wife's infidelity, I sought solace in the mountains. In February 2018, I, a man in my 30s, discovered that my wife had been cheating on me after 3.5 years of marriage. At the time, I was working a contract job that required frequent business travel, but also allowed me to work remotely from home. My wife landed a highly lucrative position as a director at a technical sales firm. Our marriage was strong and fulfilling, although it faced some strain due to my frequent absences for work and her increased workload. Here's the backstory. 5 years ago, I met my now ex-wife at a mutual friend's barbecue. Our meeting turned into an affair, and I couldn't help but feel like I was defying the odds by being with such a stunning and eloquent woman. Surprisingly, she was drawn to my rugged and unrefined demeanor. As we started dating, our passion for each other grew exponentially within a few weeks, and it seemed like our clothes simply vanished whenever we were together at each other's apartments. After an 18-month courtship, we exchanged vows and moved into a spacious apartment as we diligently saved up for our dream house. However, the dynamics of our relationship began to shift after the first 3 years of marriage. My love for her remained unchanged, but I started to notice her tendency to pick fights over trivial matters. Her irritation grew when I expressed my frustration with her increasing work delays and frequent activities. She justified her actions as necessary for her climb up the corporate ladder. She also reminded me that I had no reason to doubt her, given my own long absences, which sometimes stretched into weeks. I had offered to reduce my travel hours, assuring her that I could manage with fewer trips. In reality, I was only away for about 4 days every 5 weeks or so. However, our arguments seemed to go in circles, never leading to a satisfactory resolution. Looking back, I never suspected that my wife was having an affair. It never crossed my mind until I noticed her constant delays at work and the decline in our intimate life. I simply attributed it to her demanding job and exhaustion. Nevertheless, I felt hurt when she rejected my attempts to start a conversation. I never found any secret correspondence until later. However, she did have a company phone, and given the amount of time she spent in our spare bedroom, which she used as her home office, she may have used it without my knowledge. Around September of 2017, Kathy started coming home from work only to leave again for work-related events in the evenings. This initially happened once a week, but gradually increased to more than 3 evenings a week. Although I'm not typically a jealous person, it was impossible not to notice the attention she would undoubtedly receive from some of the men at her office. Apparently, her main focus was on work, but she was more likely to collaborate with male supervisors than with female coworkers. I first became aware of her infidelity about a month before the day we eventually divorced. That day, she stopped by the store before coming home. She requested my assistance with the groceries, so as I reached for a couple of bags from the back seat of her car, I noticed a glint of pink just beneath the front passenger seat. To my surprise, it turned out to be one of my wife's bras. I recognized it because she preferred bras from a certain clothing store. Looking back, I now realize the significance of the bra. When she was in the mood, she invariably removed her bra from under her clothes first. I don't know why, but when I noticed the bra, I was immediately overcome with a sense of unease. There was no rational explanation as to why her bra was under the seat. I decided to leave it there, and my unease grew. And then I felt nauseous and my heart raced. And when I returned to the kitchen with the bags, Kathy asked what was wrong with me, noting that I looked like I had seen a ghost. I quickly brushed off her remark. I did my best to hide my anger and feelings, although it took all my self-control that night. The next day, I decided to find out if she was having a relationship with someone. I began contemplating all the potential clues I had been overlooking. Apart from the incident with the bra, I had no concrete evidence. Given that we lived in a bustling city with her working in a downtown office building, I momentarily shifted my focus away from the affair notion. Instead, I thought it might be a good idea to give her more attention and try to reconnect. One Friday night after work, I prepared a beautiful dinner. I carefully set the dining table with elegant plates, silverware, and lit candles. I also bought a bottle of fine wine and a bouquet of roses. When she came home from work as usual, I excitedly showed her the table setting and everything I had done for it. She smiled sadly and apologized, explaining that she had plans to meet her coworkers tonight at a local establishment. She suggested that we could have a quick dinner together before she left, but she needed to shower first. My stomach churned, rendering me utterly speechless. I won't delve into the anger that consumed me at that moment, but I had reached my breaking point. As she went into the shower, I seized the opportunity to discreetly place my company's cell phone in her car's back seat. Lately, I had been contemplating this as a means to track her whereabouts using my personal phone. I promptly discarded the prepared meal along with the bouquet of roses in the trash. She returned from her shower, dressed up and appearing as stunning as ever. She suggested, "Okay, let's eat." However, I responded, "Never mind, go out with your friends." She regarded me with a puzzled expression and inquired if I was upset. I replied, "I'm just disappointed that you never seem interested in doing anything together." She irritably told me to stop acting like a child. I stood there absorbing her words and replied, "Silly me, I thought you'd want to spend the evening together." Then she just smirked and walked away. I pulled out my second phone and turned on the tracking on my work phone. After a while, I saw her walk into a bar about 20 minutes away, the same one she frequented with her coworkers. I made the decision to find her car, and indeed, I spotted her in the bar's parking lot. I parked my car on the other side of the street and waited. It was completely out of character for me to act like a stalker, but I convinced myself that it was necessary in order to alleviate my anxiety about her whereabouts. About an hour after I arrived, I saw her leaving the bar in the company of a man who looked like one of the executives I'd seen at her job. He reached out and pulled her to him, and they kissed. My stomach twisted into a lump at the sight. I just went numb as I watched them. They walked over to another car and got in together. I tried my best to discreetly follow them as the car drove away, and about 10 minutes later, they pulled up to the hotel, confirming my worst suspicions. I pulled over on the street adjacent to the hotel and watched them as they exited the car, walking hand in hand into the hotel. It was more than enough confirmation. Overwhelmed with a sense of foolishness, I began banging my fists against the steering wheel in frustration. That was it. Something inside of me felt like it went dark, and I couldn't tell if I had blacked out or experienced some out-of-body sensation. The yonkai came to my senses and decided I needed a drink. I did not yet know that this moment marked the beginning of a new direction in my life that I could not have imagined. Once outside of town, I began to re-experience everything I had just witnessed. Crying with anger, I drove to the outskirts of town about 30 miles. I stumbled upon a cozy little bar and decided to stop. I took a seat at the bar and ordered a drink. My appearance must have reflected my emotional turmoil because the female bartender commented that I seemed like someone who had been thoroughly defeated. I held back a half smile and replied, "You could say that." The guy sat down on the stool next to me and struck up a conversation. I wasn't really in the mood for conversation, but something about this guy made me uneasy. During our conversation, the subject of my wife's infidelity came up. I started talking about how I wanted to leave her and put it all behind me. The guy looked at me, patted me on the back and said, "Buddy, you're not alone." Something similar happened to me a few years back. I genuinely believe that these events occur for a reason. And let me share with you that your life can now take a different turn, whether for the better or worse. The choice is entirely yours at this juncture. His words made an impression on me, bringing me out of my despondency. Although I knew I was in pain, I had always been a logical thinker, and his words resonated with me, so we introduced ourselves to each other. His name was Ray. Ray had a bit of a country vibe to him, but he was the salt of the earth type I deeply admired. He inquired about my plans to move out, and it dawned on me that I hadn't really given much thought to what lay ahead. I was sure I didn't want to stay with my wife any longer, and I couldn't ignore the overwhelming fight or flight feeling. He then shared, "I truly sympathize with your situation, and if there ever comes a time when you feel the need to leave, I have an idea. I have a trailer sitting on my property," he continued. "It's not in the best condition, and it could use some fixing up. Maybe you could come and see if you can imagine living in it temporarily. I'll even offer you a favorable deal. I have a nice lot where you could park it," he added. "You'll be doing me a favor by keeping an eye on it. Besides, it might be good for you to take your mind off your current situation. Just a thought." It took me a moment to fully comprehend his offer. The bartender, who had been listening in on our conversation, offered a warm smile. "Honey," she chimed in, "if I could have made my getaway from my crazy ex-husband years ago, I would have eagerly embraced the opportunity to live in his trailer. Anything to clear my head and start fresh." I couldn't help but feel like I had stumbled into the twilight zone, but perhaps this was precisely the change I needed. I told Ray, yes, I'll definitely consider it and maybe even come check it out. After a little while, we went our separate ways, making plans to meet at his place in a few days. I began to feel a glimmer of perspective and an opportunity to break free from what felt like a nightmare. One thing became crystal clear: I had no desire to be with my wife ever again under any circumstances. Cheating has always struck me as a heinous act that I deeply believe I can never come to terms with. When I got home following Kathy, I sat down on the couch. Kathy appeared and asked, "Where have you been?" I turned to her and asked, "Where were you?" She replied, "You know, I went out for a drink." I decided to be direct and asked her point blank, "Are you having an affair?" She was startled at first, but quickly pulled herself together and replied, "No." "Why on earth would you ask me that?" Then I said, "I heard you have someone from work." She asked, "Who told you that?" I replied, "A friend of mine, but I won't tell you his name." She dismissed my words, noting that I was talking nonsense and blaming it on the fact that I was drunk and delirious. Then she continued the conversation, asking where I'd been. I informed her that I had gone out to a bar to have drinks with friends. She appeared as though she wanted to ask more questions, but ultimately returned to our bedroom and went back to bed. Given the confirmation that she had been lying to me for months, I decided to sleep on the couch that night. I couldn't sleep at all. My mind was filled with disturbing images of her with this other man in bed, overwhelmed by disgust, hurt, and self-pity. Yet, amidst these painful thoughts, the idea of Ree's trailer began to shine like a revelation. It brought a glimmer of hope and comfort that lifted my spirits. I couldn't help but feel there was something wrong with me, but the pain I was experiencing pushed me into a fight-or-flight mode, and the instinct to flee won me over. The next morning, we didn't say much, and we carried on with the weekend as though nothing had happened. A few days later, I arranged to meet Ray. When I arrived at his place, I found that he owned a beautiful ranch, and the trailer he was talking about was really impressive and had all the amenities needed for a comfortable stay. I had traveled in a trailer with some college friends during spring break, and I really liked it. So I made Ray an offer on the trailer, and he agreed to the price, practically gifting it to me. He gave me directions to his ranch, and I eagerly drove there to take a closer look. The grounds, set amongst lush trees and scrubland, with nearby hiking and biking trails fringing it, were breathtaking. At the foot of the mountains was a small cabin perched on a hill overlooking the entire site. Conveniently, there was water and electricity for the trailer, making it the perfect spot. Ray agreed to tow the trailer to the site and set it up for me. Over the next few weeks, I tried to get Kathy to come clean about her actions, but all I ran into was denial. I told her that if I found out about her cheating, there would be no reconciliation. My efforts seemed to have the opposite effect, further solidifying her denial. The facts of her denial were so absurd that I could hardly contain a bitter laugh. I realized that I had no concrete evidence of her infidelity, and berated myself for not taking at least a few pictures of her with another man. Amidst the mental anguish, I reached the firm conclusion that I wanted to end the marriage. Instead of immediately sharing my sentiments with Kathy, I silently began to make plans. I discreetly started relocating my belongings from the apartment to the trailer while she was at work. This course of action at least gave me a sense of taking control in a difficult situation. I did notice a shift in Kathy's behavior during this period as she started treating me more kindly. But in my mind, it was too little too late. As she continued with her company outings after work, I recognized that I too needed a break. In fact, while she was getting ready to go out for the evening, I got dressed too. Just then, she looked at me and asked me what my plans were. I simply replied that I was going out with friends. She started to ask other questions, but I interrupted her, explaining that she didn't know them, and it would mostly be a lot of conversation that she wasn't interested in. Ironically, that's exactly what she said to me when I asked if I could join her at one of her office meetings at the bar. She looked a little offended, but finally said, "Okay, have a nice time." I assured her that I would. In the process of working on the trailer and chatting with Ray at the bar, I began to make new friends in my life. Actually, this change in my social life has brought some nice moments of socializing with a wonderful group of friends and family members. And just to be clear, I made the decision to moderate my alcohol consumption to avoid picking up bad habits. It would have been very easy to drown in self-pity during this period. Kathy informed me that she had a work trip scheduled for the following week. Curious, I inquired about the attendees, and she mentioned it was the executive team along with some department heads. I simply looked at her and calmly expressed that I hoped she had a wonderful time with her boyfriend. In hindsight, I regretted saying it. It triggered a lot of heated arguments between us, and in many ways I wished I knew more about her as a fair partner. But as Ray wisely put it, in the grand scheme of things, it didn't really matter who the other guy was. What truly mattered was that she made the choice to betray my trust. She indeed shattered our marriage. She could either acknowledge it or deny it, but the facts remained unchanged, my friend. It was almost as if Ray should document his insights and publish them for those who have experienced betrayal. With her work trip on the horizon, I seized the opportunity to move the remainder of my belongings out completely. After Kathy departed for her work trip, I collected everything of value that remained and loaded it into my vehicle. I wasn't taking any furniture or larger items, so it mostly consisted of clothes and my work-related computers and equipment. Before I left, I first drafted a note to leave behind, but after thinking about it, I decided to keep it simple. I took a piece of paper and wrote, "I hope it was worth it." As I placed my wedding ring on top of the note on the kitchen table, I felt a great sense of relief wash over me. I felt liberated. There was no longer a need to hide the truth. I understood that I would have to deal with some emotional baggage and pain, but I finally had the time and space to begin the healing process. My main objective now was to remove her from my life as smoothly and swiftly as possible. I wasn't proud of not confronting her more assertively or coaxing a confession from her, but I had made my decision to move forward. I never had the chance to let out my anger, to yell, scream, or curse her. But after making my confession, I had come to a firm conclusion in my mind. She didn't deserve me. She had shown a complete lack of respect for everything we had built together. Our once promising future, including plans for a house and starting a family, was now nothing but history. All of those dreams and plans are gone now, with no possibility of turning back. I don't owe her anything. She will have to deal with the consequences on her own. I didn't have a particular agenda in mind. I hadn't contacted a lawyer or taken any formal steps. My primary goal was simply to find some clarity for myself. I found solace and joy in my new trailer, and the mountainous air provided the fresh start I craved. Over the following week, I picked up running again, and it felt invigorating, like a return to life itself. I chose not to respond to any of Kathy's texts while she was away, as there wasn't much to engage with. They were mostly just updates like, we just landed or we're having a team dinner, and I didn't feel the need to maintain that connection. She did send a few messages asking about my whereabouts and urging me to get in touch. However, on the days she returned home, my phone practically exploded with her messages. She texted me incessantly and made constant attempts to reach me through calls. On the first day, even her mother tried reaching out to me. Since I only have my dad left on my side of the family and we're not particularly close, she didn't attempt to involve him. After the initial flurry of tearful messages, I chose not to listen to the rest of her voicemails. Her texts included messages like, "What is this? We need to talk. I don't know what you think, but there's nothing going on." I'm not involved with anyone. I'm not having an affair. However, after a week of not responding, she eventually sent me a text that read, "I'm sorry things got out of hand." Finally, the confession I had been seeking came through. She admitted, "I was involved with someone at work, but it meant nothing. I got caught up in my work, and you were gone a lot, and I just made a mistake. I was gonna end it, but it was a mistake." Oddly enough, her confession only deepened my dislike for her. I couldn't fathom why she couldn't be honest from the start. This wasn't the woman I had once envisioned building a future with. After all, how could mistakes last for 6, 8, or even a year? Her desperate pleas for me to come back and work on the marriage started to feel pathetic at some point. For a couple of weeks, she stopped trying to contact me. I continued to ignore her, determined not to let her pry any information about my current living situation. I was determined to keep this woman from intruding on my newfound sanctuary. However, one day she began sending me angry texts, accusing me of being a coward and refusing to talk to her. Her texts became increasingly emotional and pleading. "You don't care about us. Please come home so we can talk. Where are you? I can come to you. Paul, please let's talk and fix things." I can't recall all the messages verbatim, but they seemed to be filled with excuses and offered very little in the way of genuine apologies. I tuned out her messages and eventually changed my cell phone number. Now fast forwarding to June 2018, I received an email from Kathy informing me that she had retained a lawyer and was proceeding with the divorce filing. In response, I simply replied, "Okay, that sounds good." However, this resulted in a flurry of emails from her demanding that I come to see her and various other requests. Eventually, she apparently realized that this approach would not work. And after a while, she wrote that if I agreed to a divorce without argument, she would not bother me anymore. I agreed to the divorce. And after a few months, I was finally a free man. After I left our apartment, I never saw her again, but it seemed that the denouement was more important to her than to me. I did have occasional thoughts of her, and yes, the pain would unexpectedly resurface, triggered by things like hearing a song we used to listen to on the radio, among other reminders. However, over time, I gradually stopped thinking about her altogether. Update: everyone, I'm officially divorced now. Things are looking up. In fact, I've met an amazing woman. While I was out on a run on the trail near my place just down the hill, I happened to assist her in changing a flat tire. And we really hit it off. She's absolutely fantastic and incredibly adorable. Despite being a few years younger than me, she appreciates my lifestyle and affectionately calls me her mountain man. I'm not in a rush to dive into anything serious, but I'm certainly not closing myself off to the possibility of relationships with women. I'm still up here in the trailer, enjoying this new chapter of my life. I have no intentions of making any major changes anytime soon, and I've embraced a simpler life. My love for the outdoors has played a significant role in helping me move on from the heartache caused by my ex-wife. I'm aware that everyone deals with these situations in their own unique way. I consider myself fortunate that we hadn't yet had children, and we were only in the 3rd year of our marriage, so I believe I made the right choice for myself. If you find yourself in a situation like this, remember that you don't have to continue living with a cheater. Please don't dwell on it. Choose the path that's best for your own well-being. Just get on with your life. Life does get better as you work on yourself. Update: I told you that I decided to get rid of my ex-wife after learning about her cheating with a coworker, which I witnessed firsthand while following her. Despite the fact that I had confronted her repeatedly and made no progress in resolving the issues, I had reached a point where I had mentally decided to let her go. My plan of action was to leave her and essentially cut all ties. Just to clarify, we still had separate accounts and no shared assets, so I could cleanly execute this plan, and our lease had naturally come to an end. While she was away on a work trip, I packed up my belongings and entirely vacated the apartment we had once shared. I relocated out of the city and settled on a piece of land where I set up a trailer I had purchased from a friend. By the time she returned from her trip, all that remained for her was a note and my wedding band. Since then, my living situation has been quite enjoyable, and I've adopted a more straightforward and simplified way of life. Given my profession as a remote worker in a technical field, I have the flexibility to work from virtually anywhere and travel as needed, provided I have access to reliable internet service. Thankfully, I do. My original plan was to work on sorting out the situation, and I had even contacted a lawyer. However, my ex-wife beat me to it, and we ended up having an uncontested divorce. Here's where things get tricky. I ran into a mutual friend some time ago, and she mentioned that my ex-wife's affair had been exposed at her workplace, and it didn't go well for either her or the guy she was cheating on me with. I interrupted her and asked her not to share any more details because my ex-wife had already caused me enough pain, and I didn't want to hear more. She also mentioned that my ex was still attempting to reach out to me, seeking reconciliation and asking for forgiveness. I didn't fully believe her, but she seemed quite certain. I asked her not to mention having seen me and she agreed. Honestly, I have no desire to engage in any conversation with my ex-wife, let alone see her. However, just 3 days ago, I unexpectedly came across my ex-wife sitting alone in a coffee shop in a small town near where I live. The location is somewhat of a recreational tourist spot, but it's several hours away from where she resides. This can't possibly be a coincidence, can it? I considered stopping in for a coffee myself, but she seemed engrossed in her phone, so I doubt she noticed me. Besides, I've since grown a thick beard and wear my hair shoulder length, so she probably wouldn't even recognize me. My immediate reaction, just like before, was to make a hasty exit, as if I had encountered the devil himself. I left the coffee shop as swiftly and discreetly as possible. However, this encounter has left me questioning whether I am as untraceable as I once thought. Is my reaction to these situations normal? I'm contemplating reaching out to a counselor or seeking professional guidance to address this flight mode I seem to enter when dealing with my ex. Up until this recent encounter, I had been content and thoroughly enjoyed my new way of life. Enjoying my independent life, a friend of mine suggested that she might have hired a private investigator to track me down. Is my ex-wife, who I've ghosted, possibly trying to track me down? I mentioned Ace. I had concerns that my ex-wife might be attempting to locate me, possibly with the intent to reconcile or for some other reason. I had relocated approximately 2 hours away from our previous residence. I spotted her last weekend in a coffee shop that I frequent in a town near my current residence. I couldn't shake the feeling that her presence there was not a mere coincidence. Fortunately, I managed to depart before she had a chance to spot me. Update: I returned to town over the past weekend to pick up some groceries and stop by my usual coffee shop to grab a coffee. I also decided to work on some work-related documents that needed to be completed, taking advantage of their free internet. Having finished my work, I left the cafe. As I walked to my car, I suddenly heard someone yell my name, Paul. I turned around and saw Kathy, my ex, waving at me from across the street. It seemed like Armageddon had finally arrived, and I stood there in shock. She rushed across the street, closing the distance between us, and extended her arms as if expecting a hug. In a reflexive move, I held my arms out with my palms facing outward, creating a physical barrier. She came to a sudden halt, her face registering hurt and confusion. She spoke, "Paul, I've been searching for you. Can we talk?" Kathy's words caught me off guard, and I felt like a trapped animal. Reluctantly, I relented and replied, "Okay, let's find a table or something and we can talk for a minute." She asked if we could go to my place, and I firmly declined. Instead, we found a bench outside a little shop at the end of the block. She began by commenting on how much I had changed and how she loved my new look, particularly my beard. She noted how my physique had changed and complimented my fitness. She made a good point, and I couldn't deny that she looked attractive. She was wearing little white shorts and a tank top, and her hair was gathered in a ponytail, just the way I liked it. My instincts were on high alert, and it was evident that she was trying to turn on the charm and sex appeal. I needed to stay grounded and figure out where this conversation was headed. She began by offering an apology for the affair. She claimed that karma had struck her hard after I left her company. She detailed how her affair partner, who had a fiancé at the time, received a reprimand and was transferred to a different position within the company. He blamed her for his transfer, and she retaliated by revealing the affair to his fiancée, which led to their breakup. As she lowered her head and began to cry, I remained silent, scanning the surroundings, unsure of how to respond. She straightened up and locked eyes with me. She straightened up and locked her gaze onto me. I couldn't help but ask her directly what she wanted from me. She began by explaining that she never intended to engage in an affair. She felt like she had been drawn into the web of office politics and power dynamics, manipulated by her affair partner's charisma and influence within the company. She admitted that she had foolishly believed she was using him as much as he was using her. She went on to say that she planned to confess everything to me, especially after I accused her of having an affair. At that time, she despised herself, and drinking after work was her way of drowning out her guilt. After I left her, she felt an overwhelming sense of loneliness, as if her heart had broken under the weight of her loss. She confessed that she had immediately ended the affair with her coworker. Feeling abandoned by me, she believed that if she could locate me and talk things out, we might have a chance to make amends and start over. She said, "Yes, we are divorced, but maybe we could start over." I stared at her, letting my emotions spill out into a passionate tirade. I can't remember the exact words. How could she believe that just one conversation with her could atone for all the damage she had done to our marriage? There was anger and hurt in my voice as I continued to speak. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you cheated on me, there is no chance of reconciliation. There is no forgiveness. You ended us the moment you decided to betray our trust. Do you really think I'm stupid enough to forget what you did? I was overwhelmed with emotion as I continued to speak, my voice now quieter but filled with pain. I followed her one night and watched her walk into a hotel with her affair partner. Do you even remember that? The trust was shattered right then and there. She began to sob, and I reluctantly allowed her to cry on my shoulder for a moment before gently pushing her away. Our eyes locked, and she looked at me with a mixture of desperation and regret. Tears welled up in her eyes as she continued, "I know I deserve all of this, Paul. Can you at least let me take you to dinner or something? I don't want to leave. I want to talk more." Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded, "Please, Paul. I know you don't want to hear this, but I love you so much. I didn't realize how much I loved you until you left me. I can't forgive myself. I don't want to forgive myself." She began to hyperventilate and sob, and I gently enclosed her in a comforting hug. It became clear to me that at that moment, the hug was the only gesture that would do anything to calm her overwhelming emotions. It was then that I painfully realized that I had indeed broken her heart, just as she had broken mine. I began to walk beside her until we came to a quiet path where the atmosphere seemed to lighten up a bit. Curiosity got the better of me, and I wondered how she had managed to find me. I jokingly inquired if she had used a search. She had used the services of a private investigator. She chuckled softly and replied in the negative, saying that the thought had crossed her mind, but she hadn't gone that route. A few weeks ago, she ran into Stacy, who inquired about her life. During their conversation, Stacy casually mentioned that she had crossed paths with me. Intrigued, she began to prod her for details, even though she was reluctant to share at first. I asked Stacy to keep it to herself, but Katie's persistence eventually convinced her to come clean. However, all she managed to find out from Stacy was that she had noticed me in town and that I lived somewhere nearby. So she started devoting her weekends to visiting the place in hopes of meeting me. Her cheeks turned red when she admitted this. I grinned, that Stacy just can't keep a secret. So we decided to have dinner together. We stumbled upon a charming restaurant with a cozy patio. I made sure to refrain from alcoholic beverages to eliminate the possibility of it blurring the lines or being used as an excuse to stay the night. Afterward, we struck up a conversation that turned out to be quite enjoyable. I walked her to her car, and she wanted to stay, urging me to change my mind. She assured me that there had been no one else since I had left, and she was adamant that I was the only one she needed. But I stood my ground. She pleaded to meet up once more, yet I remained non-committal. I shared my new email address with her, but that was the extent of it. She expressed a desire for my phone number, but I declined, fearing she might inundate me with incessant texts and calls. She shed tears over this refusal. She mentioned that she would be back in town the following weekend and asked if I was interested. I did not respond to her offer. Just before she left, she assured me that she would email me all the details about the date and location of the meeting. Then she held my hands, locked eyes with me, and uttered something that caught me off guard. She said, "Paul, I will always love you and will do anything to prove it." And with that, she departed. I am still impressed by her words. She spoke with such unwavering determination. Even now, I can't imagine resuming a romantic relationship with her. However, at this moment, I feel a sense of relief. I can't even imagine the possibility of a friendly relationship. And frankly, I'm still not sure we'll ever be able to reconnect again. After returning home, I went for a refreshing lengthy run and enjoyed a couple of beers, which put me in a positive frame of mind. However, can anyone assure me that she wouldn't disrupt this newfound equilibrium? I remain uncertain. I'm still grappling with this. However, I'm fortunate to have time on my side to work through this and gain some clarity. I received a lengthy email from her last week, in which she expressed her love and remorse for the situation. Remorse for the affair once more. She expressed a desire to visit me and spend the weekend together. However, my reaction to all of this was to firmly decline her offer. I have been content embracing a solitary life for now, residing in my remote location and striving to maintain the simplicity of my situation. I enjoy the company of various women and friends, and see no reason to change my current situation. I have my own path of self-determination, and I intend to stick to it for the time being. Therefore, when I responded to her letter, I frankly expressed my position. I have made it clear that I have no intention of reconciling with her. She is responsible for her own choices, and I no longer trust her. I gave her my best wishes and left the door open to the possibility of friendship, perhaps sometime in the future, which remains uncertain. Her response was quite revealing. Naturally, she expressed deep disappointment with my response. However, she also said that she had accepted a job offer in another state, and her real intention was for me to join her in this new location. She knew that my job allowed me to work remotely and that I had the option to live anywhere. She hoped I would consider moving in with her as an exchange student. The idea was to start fresh in a brand new place. As her departure was approaching, she wanted to meet me in person and make a strong case for the idea. Luckily, I have a business trip coming up that will occupy me for a week, so our communication will be over, which is a relief. Consequently, she will no longer be a part of my life. I expect to receive a few more emails in the near future, but eventually, I think she will realize that our relationship is over, and she will have to look for someone else. Thank you for listening to the story until the end, and if you enjoyed it, please support us with a like, as well as subscribe to our channel. Write in the comments what you think about the story.